Peter.
Okay, we're live.
How's your wing feeling?
Good.
Coming along?
We're live.
Oh,
I still haven't,
why?
I used to be able to press about 2:30 and the doctor says I'll be only at 80%, so. As long as I can do that at 80%, good enough, it's my own body weight, so.
Okay, sitting with a quorum, we'll call the meeting at 6:01. Adoption of the agenda, any additions or changes?
No, Worship, we adopt the agenda as presented, so, sorry, there's never additions, so. Yeah, because,
I'll move that the GMP committee adopts the agenda as presented.
Okay. Any questions on that? None? I'll call the question. All in favor?
In favor.
Okay, next is 3.1, Governance and Priorities Committee, March 3rd, 2022.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of March 3rd, 2022 as presented.
So the question to the motion, why are we adopting these minutes from March 3rd?
oh, that, your worship, members of council, yes, now I remember, because I was doing the research for one of the policies on how many people attended after hours, and I could never find why this, I had no motion to have this adopted. Yes, so that's why we brought this back to council for formal adoption.
Okay,
Okay, any more questions on it? I'll call the question. All in favor?
In favor.
Okay,
We would have to have a separate motion for 20 September as well.
yeah.
Um,
Governance and Priorities Committee, September 20th, 2023, for the minutes.
I'll move that as well.
Okay, any questions on that motion? None, call the question, all in favor?
In favor.
Okay, 5.1, Draft Bylaw 608-23, Code of Conduct. Who's gonna take that?
So, hello, portion of committee. Legislative Services is catching up on some backlog of recommendations from council. One being which it was identified that our Code of Conduct bylaw doesn't actually contain any reference to council committees. We don't have any sort of documentation referencing council committee conduct whatsoever. So by the direction of council, we have included council committees and the terminology being other bodies formed by council. So we have included that in the Code of Conduct bylaw that is generally used for members of council. So we've updated that, and then as you'll see on the RFD, as we were reviewing the bylaw, there's a couple changes also within the bylaw. One is a whereas that references the Code of Conduct for elected officials regulation. So that's something that is standard practice. That's something that council already has to refer to per the MGA. So that's in one whereas. Also, the terminology in camera was used in an old bylaw, and we know that we need to refer that to as closed session or committee of the whole. So we've updated that language. We did include some additional definitions, of course, just because we have updated the policy to include members, council committees. So those are also updated in the definitions. And then we've just simply updated the format. If it looks a little cleaner for your viewing, that's why. So it's just formatted in a way that we read our legislation. I will note that while administration was doing some research on Code of Conduct bylaws, which it is seemingly common practice to have council committees coupled with council, same conduct is expected by everyone who is representing the organization. There are some items that this municipality could look at to enhance its code of conduct bylaw in the event that's wanted. We haven't done that, but some of those items that we could review in the future include updating the language of what general conduct is, including other applicable legislation that we know we do have to adhere to. Again, that just prevents from having to reference multiple documents at once. Social media conduct, which of course is an ongoing conversation, just given the nature of how people share information and communicate with each other. What healthy debate is, that's seemingly one in more progressive conduct bylaws, compliance to FOIP, flushing out what a conflict of interest is, acceptance of gifts, including an informal complaint process. And this was something interesting that I did find. Often, information or feedback is received to the municipality in an informal way. Some bylaws are actually addressing how that's laid out. And then further, a formal complaint process that actually uses a third party to provide that process. So those are just some things in the event that Woodlands County wishes to further look at its bylaw, they can visit. Nonetheless, you will see the draft bylaw starting on page 11 for your reference.
Through the chair to administration, I guess to council as well. I know when I read through this, on the surface, it looked like we were just taking the existing bylaw and adding committee members to it. So given that, I'd be prepared to make a motion that the GMP committee forwards draft bylaw 608-23 Code of Conduct to council for consideration.
Peter?
Yeah, I just have, through the chair to administration, I just have a question on representing the county part. Do the members fall under the same, that's in 3.11, A through, I guess, F. Do the members that are on those committees, do they fit into that same discipline?
Section 13 you're referring to, Councillor Kulkin?
I believe so, yes.
So, through the chair, just to all of the committee, Section 13 specifically identifies all councillors and members shall. So just trying to keep that language very clear.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Okay, any more questions to the motion? There's none. Call the question. All in favor?
In favor.
Six point two, review of preliminary draft municipal development plan 2023.
We have 6.1 first.
Sorry, Your Worship, you missed.
Oh, then this one? Okay, sorry. 6.1 draft amendment policies 1955-02 shift differential, 1955-03 callback pay, and 1955-05 standby pay.
Your Worship, members of council, these three policies that are presented in front of you is the ongoing administration updating current policies. These policies haven't been updated since 2003. And one of the, I'll go through this shift differential. What it did further define was the hours of where we would do shift differential and moving it from 50 cents an hour to 75 cents an hour, and then from 75 cents to an hour on the weekend. This policy, for the most part, doesn't have a very large financial impact because for the most, we don't do a lot of shift differential. Primary sometimes in the morning, in the wintertime when the snow plows go out, and then the airport has the bigger. But as you can see, we looked at the previous rates based on from previous years, and it was about a $450 impact. The callback pay, for the most time, again, we just updated the pay so that, or not the pay, but clarification on when an employee gets called back, when did they actually start their time to come back in, as well as to meet current legislation, so that in the event that our 3-hour callback time isn't in legislation, that we meet current practice. Again, this has minimal financial impact, because when we usually call individuals back in, we make them, they get overtime, and then they also get, we make them, not make them, they're usually here more than 3 hours at a time. So. And then the last one, which has the largest impact, is the standby pay. So these are the individuals that are on call. They have gone from $15 a day to $25, $35 to a flat rate of $65 a day if you're on call. Typically, what that occurs is, again, in the event of a snowstorm, those individuals are on call. Weekend for our water utility people, and for the most part, those are proposed rates are in accordance with the industry standard. And down on, I'm trying to find it, on page 13 of your agenda, on this, sorry, page 13 of this RFD, there's the people that we had solicited in regards to their standby on call. And when they say 3 hours regular pay, our regular pay sometimes can be around, I think the average is $35 an hour for individuals that are on. So if there are any questions.
Alan?
Thanks, through the chair to admin. So what's the financial impact to this one?
This one is about $40,000 a year.
So an increase,
Based,
this policy will result in approximately $40,000 extra.
that's correct.
Yeah, through the chair to admin. Okay, so even though that costs us an extra $40,000, what you're suggesting is that this brings us into alignment with the legislation that requires us under our human resource.
In this case, it's not the legislation, however, it's the industry standards, yeah. Other municipalities in our area.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions on this? Peter?
Yeah, well, I'll make a motion then that we that we send the Governance and Priorities Committee forward the draft amendment policies 95502 shift differential and 195503 callback pay and 95505 standby pay to council for their consideration.
Alan?
Would you consider a friendly amendment? You said 95502 instead of 1955.
Yes.
You got that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any more questions on this? Call the question, all in favor?
In favor.
That is passed.
Are you gonna turn over the chair?
if Dave is ready.
We're going on to.
The very
6.2.
last one, yeah, it's the last.
6.2. Or do you just want me to?
We're at the end of the meeting anyway, so might as well.
Okay, we just note that, that's all.
6.2, review of preliminary draft municipal development plan 2023. I'll try this one again. Go ahead. Go.
Good evening, council. So Woodlands County is well overdue for review of our municipal development plan. The last one was adopted in March of 2013, so we're 10 years have passed very quickly. A little bit of backstory with respect to the draft is that we had hired a consultant in 2016 to start the review. We had done some community engagement at that point by holding some open houses, getting an idea what folks were thinking around planning and development in some certain areas of the municipality. And a draft municipal development plan was started at that time. However, due to discussions around the intermunicipal development plan, which was also kind of included in those discussions at the time, retired, and then 2019 we had reorganization, and then financial recovery plan, and then COVID hit, so it kind of got set on the back burner. So 2021 administration said, okay, we got to get this rolling, so we brought in a planning support person to complete the MDP revisions, as well as review our other statutory plans. So the land use bylaw and the intermunicipal development plan, which are slated for later this winter and 2024. So what we did was essentially do some community engagement with this particular draft that we have on just one key component, because it is a significant change to the document, and that was around farmland assessment value and what that means for future subdivision in the agricultural world. So in June 2023, we held open house in Fort Assiniboine as well as in Selma, where our primary agricultural areas are. Based on the notes that we included in the RFD, very favorable response to the idea around using farmland assessment valuation versus what used to be in the old document based on soil classification. We thought that we tried to think outside the box and come up with something different, because we have so little class 3 soils. So we kind of brainstormed.
It's hard to see on this map, but our class 3s are this this light pink, so it's like all just up in here and some down here and all along the river. So there's not a whole lot of it, but there is some in some significant areas where there are some subdivisions occurring.
So we did some brainstorming administratively and did some research with some other municipalities to see what they, things that they had looked at. And we came up with the, like I said, the farmland assessment valuation, which is essentially stands for the ability of the land and its production of agricultural products. And when an assessor looks at the farmland valuation, I mean, that's including the soil, the topography, erosion, how many stones are in the field kind of thing, flooding, drainage, like it's all taken or determined essentially by, there's 2 guidelines that they follow, the Alberta Ministries guidelines and the Alberta Farmland Assessment Map. So what we were able to come up with was, we had Catalyst, our mapping company, do a map for us to see what that looked like. And give us a very clear picture of as to where the majority of the farming activity takes place.
Right, so we set the values, based on what we thought and what was advised by our assessor on what value would be appropriate to scale it. And the green is kind of representative of the class 3, but there is slightly more obviously, just because not all the class 3s will be good. There's not enough, so this is like a representative of the dark green being better than everything else, which is still up in here and down in the southern portions along the river.
Okay. So the preliminary final draft has been formatted for internal review, attached for your perusal. Final formatting will take place once we obtain your feedback, as well as another final round of public engagement with the entire document. So we've attached this evening kind of a summary of the key areas that have been amended or added to the draft MDP. Unfortunately, we didn't track the document because we've kind of, even though it wasn't supposed to be a total rewrite, if you tried to track it, you'd never read it. So because we've rearranged it and done all kinds of little tweaks to it, so it'd be very difficult to follow on the old one, what we've done with the new one. So kind of take the old one and put it aside and we'll focus on the new one. So just looking for some roundtable discussion this evening. I do have a quick PowerPoint presentation on kind of what those key areas are that we've amended. Not sure if you have that there. Yeah, okay. So essentially, what is an MDP? It's a high-level document, sorry?
So I just, before you get going through the slide, I just wanted to clarify, I think it was a conversation that you and I had earlier. Some of that, some of the best farmland could be within the IDP, is that correct?
Correct.
And so which document is going to be enforced, the IDP or this MDP?
The third slide, I'll get to that.
Okay, all right, perfect.
Okay.
Dave's got a question.
I do, kind of a question or I guess kind of a point here to look at. On the one form here, we're talking about the public engagement dates you're looking at in the second week of November. The 7th and 9th, council is away for RMA that week.
Sorry, that was amended to
21st and 23rd.
21st and 23rd.
It should be, it's later in the slide, I think.
Okay, I was just reading the form we have here with the RFD and it's still got
Okay,
the 7th and 9th.
maybe it attached the wrong one, because remember I amended that.
Yeah, and you did.
Yeah, we had amended that, sorry Dave.
Wait, ask what was the dates?
November 21st
And then the Thursday, the
at
23rd.
Fort Assiniboine, and then November 23rd at the Whitecourt office here.
Okay,
Thank you for both. 21st and 23rd.
Okay, so what is an MDP? It's pretty much a very high-level plan on the future land uses within the municipality, growth and how we want it to look like in the future. So it's a view from a high level. A lot of people reference it to a 30,000-foot look at it, or take a drone and hover over top of the municipality and have a look at what the future could look like. So big picture of the MDP. So it is a legislative document. It is adopted by bylaw, and it is part of a planning hierarchy. So as Councillor Dean alluded there and was asking about what that hierarchy looks like, so the MGA outlines what it is that we need to have. And then you've got your intermunicipal development plans, which are another layer. You then have your municipal development plans, and then you have your area structure plans, and then you have your land use bylaw. So with respect to, we had received one letter of inquiry, I believe all of council received it, and the individual is in the intermunicipal development plan area. So that document, yes, supersedes the municipal development plan.
Peter,
Yeah, through the chair to Joan. You said that there's an area structure plan, there's the farm. How does it, what category, I guess, would the airport be under?
The airport is almost I want to say its own separate entity. It is mentioned in the municipal development plan. However, what we're working on is the airport vicinity protection plan, which will also become part of a document. You could almost call it an area structure plan.
Okay, so my understanding of the vicinity protection is a little different than what it would be if there's land use and issues like that involved in a plan like that. So I'm just curious as to how that fits into the bigger planning. Is that a completely separate place where you guys would have to do some planning work, or?
So through the chair to Councillor Kilken, as part of the AVPA, there's also a section in which we reviewed the land use bylaw portion of it. And when we do the land use bylaw, that'll be included in there. So it, the setbacks and things like that will be in the land use bylaw. The more details will be in the land use bylaw.
Through the chair, quick question on the IDP, because I know that our IDP discussions we've had is also going to be coming up for renewal. Is that something we're planning on working on kind of conjunctively with our new MDP, or are we doing one then the other? Because I know you do have some overlap there.
So through the chair, yes. The MDP, we can adopt it, and then the IDP will be the next layer that we'll look at. And yes, we need to be cognizant of what's in our MDP, that it matches what's in the intermunicipal development plan as well. So yeah, we have to watch that as we're approving items, that we remember those layers, and that, yeah, we're not saying one thing in one document and another something else in another document. So we have to be cognizant of what's said in each document.
there you go.
Okay. So why does the county need an MDP? Essentially, the Municipal Government Act tells us we need one. So in all municipalities, regardless of size or population, it used to be before if you were a certain size, you had to have one. Now everybody needs one. And it must address future land use, future development in the county, coordination of land use, future growth patterns, provision of required transportation systems, and provision of municipal services and facilities. The current MDP, as I indicated, was adopted in March 2013, and public consultation to date has been the two, or most recent is the one in Anselmo and Fort Assiniboine. And we also requested public feedback on our website. So once those open houses were held, we put it on our website, and there was availability to all residents to have a kick at the can if they wanted to comment on it. And that's where we did receive the letter with respect to, are they impacted because of the intermunicipal development plan area. So key areas of update, essentially for ease of reference, the overall layout, we reorganized the topics. So examples, location of maps is with the topic versus at the back of the document. We've also put the interpretation and definitions at the back of the document. We removed outdated language and jargon, included more contemporary verbiage, so examples. We updated, of course, the legislative content, reference to such as references to the MGA. We updated names of the GOA ministries. We removed old terms used in planning. Used smart growth was a big one years ago. It's no longer used. It's more on the contemporary planning, I think they call it nowadays. big add to the document is with respect to recognition of our Indigenous partners. So we included in our location map, treaties 6 and 8 on the map, as well as we've included section 2 of the document around reconciliation. And just, if I'm hoping council had an opportunity to review it, some thoughts on it. One of the implementation is to create a reconciliation action plan, and I believe that's being worked on currently. Some of the general land use considerations. So we removed old primary goals from the 1991 ID 15 MDP. There seemed to be quite a bit of that. The visions and principles in this document are essentially the addition of the reconciliation. What we've heard loud and clear from our residents is protection of agricultural lands from fragmentation and land use conflict. And then, of course, economic diversity. So your commercial, your industrial uses, whether that be in your hamlets, your agri-food industry, whatever it might be. And ensuring that we can, have some of those types of developments in the municipality. Around the environment and development strategies, again, we've enhanced the context around the need for engineers' reports, whether that be floodplains, slopes, whatever it may be. Taking environmental reserve where it's needed, again, there's steep slopes, wetlands, whatever it may be. And the objectives and policies have been tightened up too in response to those events, such as the wildfires, flooding, and so fire smarting, things like that. And developing in the increased hazard areas, slopes near floodplain, we don't necessarily want to encourage it. We can get people moving away from developing in those areas. That's kind of our goal.
Just to, Councillor Wilhelm is now online also at 6:32.
Hey guys, I get really bad internet, so hopefully I'll try to keep it to a minimum.
A lot of the land use policies and objectives that are in the document were reviewed and updated just to be more clear and ease of use and achievable, I think is the biggest term. Some of the policies that were in there were old policies, difficult to try and achieve. And I think what you'll see is that the towards the end of the document is the new implementation table, where it gives a lot of context around things that will come out of this document as a result of it. So under some of the land use agriculture, that's again another significant change with the draft, this particular draft, and how agricultural land is categorized, developed, and subdivided. And that's where the farmland assessment valuation comes in. Again, just going over, we have had open houses.
Peter's got a question.
Yeah, through the chair to Joan. When we had the gentleman in to discuss the assessment and how land assessment is, and that we're under a regulated assessment right now. When we do this land use planning, is that a consideration in the conversation? To understand better what would happen if, the minute you change, you designate a piece of property that says that's going to be what it's for. Does that create a difficulty in the taxation if they choose to now take that out of the regulated?
I think, sorry, I'm not 100% sure what they're going to do with, evaluation of farmland. I would think it's still going to be similar in that they're using those soil types and the different list of items that they look at, the standard kind of what they look at farmland is.
Yeah, the reason I asked the question is that because if we change, like, this is kind of unique what you guys have done, is to look at this differently, and I'm curious as to whether they would view it differently if we say, well, this is what we've designated it for. Would they view it differently than what the province would look at it when they do their assessment on Class 1, Class 2 land?
Yeah, it would still be zoned agricultural.
Okay.
So in the land use bylaw, sorry, it would be, zoned agricultural. And then however they assess it.
Yeah, so the property, your worship, if I may, the property is assessed based on the productivity of the land. If the use changes where the individual takes it out of agricultural production, then taxation would then be best use, right? So.
Yeah, and I guess my question is because we're saying now that some of this stuff may not be agriculture, is that in alignment with what, like if we, some of the areas in the proposal are not gonna be in the way that we look at it as a municipality? So I just don't know how that would be affected.
But you're remaining, everything is still agricultural.
Everything that's currently agricultural will stay agricultural.
Okay.
It's just whenever we receive a subdivision application, then we would look at the valuation
Okay.
and determine whether we want it to be subdivided further or how the procedure would go from there.
Okay, good, thank you, that answers my question.
Okay,
Sorry.
Dave,
Quick question, and it's just back to the last slide, we're talking about developments within floodways, we're kind of in that area. Now, we do have the resolution that we pushed through the RMA to try to get the GOA on board with finalizing their legislation on what's allowed and what's not allowed, and the regulations for, I guess, around floodways and flood fringe. Is that gonna be captured in our, possibly captured in our MDP, or are we kind of using old legislation, and if that gets finalized, we're gonna have to redraft that again?
So, through the chair, the MDP again, high level.
Yeah.
So it's indicating that we want to protect it, and if legislation changes in the MGA, it'll be more likely a land use bylaw amendment to include those uses and things, setbacks, whatever it might be, in the land use bylaw, because that's where the details are. Whereas this, we want to protect the area that's in floodway areas, floodplain areas. So, if something comes out of this, then we would amend the land use bylaw according to whatever that legislation
Okay.
might be.
Thank you.
Okay, new section under transportation, air, again, just meaning operation, development, protection of the airport and adjacent lands, in other words, the AVPA. And then also, as indicated, there'll be some verbiage in the land use bylaw.
Just one question. So the AVPA though is for lands that are outside the airport.
And within.
Okay.
So, MGA expectations, we've
You have your hand up,
updated,
Al?
sorry?
Go ahead.
MGA expectations, so let's see, it's been updated to align with legislation. We still have intermunicipal development plans and intermunicipal collaboration frameworks that are outside of this document. It does mention that we need to also take into account those plans. Implementation task summary. Now this is big, this is new. Again, was never in any of our other documents, but it's an addition that outlines tasks as objectives. So in other words, list of things that have been identified in the MDP action where we're gonna take some action. And there's, it indicates the department that's responsible for it and some timeframes. So in other words, or as an example, area structure plans for the hamlets. You know, is it a short-term, medium-term, long-term thing, but it's something that we wanna do. And we feel is viable for each of the hamlets. And as to what they'll look like, and it'll give us a better understanding for servicing, future development, you know, whether it be location of new schools, commercial areas, residential development, whatever that might look like. Some of the other action items that are listed in there. Provide some fire smart literature, to be available at the counter. Update our flood risk mapping. Maybe we wanna look at, 1 in 500 instead of the 1 in 100 that we currently utilize. And again, dependent upon maybe what provincial legislation might look like when it comes out. Seek funding, to create that 1 in 500 flood mapping, you know, maybe we can work with the province if that's the direction that they go. Create public awareness and education campaigns regarding the better agricultural land approach. That's kind of short term, so if this is adopted, we'll get some stuff on the website, some advertising around it, things like that, so people are aware that this is the change that's occurred. Create secondary dwelling regulations in the land use bylaw. Create regulations and illustrated graphics for new subdivision regulations. Reconcile ag land use districts into one. Again, that's in the land use bylaw. So objectives that are in here have been put into a table for ease of reference. These are specific tasks. So rather than, you know, approving a document and then it getting kind of set in the shelf, as often they do, is that we've got this task summary that gives us some guidance as to our next steps with the document and moving forward for our other planning documents too. So I don't know if we wanna go a little further into the farmland assessment valuation discussion and what that looks like as far as subdivision. I think some of the councillors were at the open houses, but we brought our maps just to, if we wanna go through them.
Yeah, through the chair to Joan. Yeah, I've had quite a bit of feedback on those open houses.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting how there's a certain polarization that happens, you know, as to what the demographic of the individuals are. But I think that what you guys really did do is make people understand that, you know, if we actually have a plan for some of that area, it makes more sense than to not have one, which is kind of where we're at. So I think that the job you guys did in doing that was pretty well received overall.
That was also a lot of the comments too.
Yeah.
We got during and after.
So I don't know, does council want me to go run through a little bit of that, or?
Any comments on that?
I'm good.
Yeah, okay. So, I guess I can run through it a little bit, is that subdivision on agricultural land it's essentially updating the approach to that and trying to protect the agricultural way of life. So, ensuring that subdivision and development, you know, there's not that negative impact on farming. What we were hearing, you know, is that a lot of agricultural land is being taken out of production as a result of subdivision. It's being split into these smaller parcels, used residentially or not farmed at all, which is then impacting those operators out there because you get individuals, say from the cities and that are moving out and And they're not used to the sounds of the cows mooing and, the chickens clucking and all that stuff. So trying to do some protection, and I think we heard it loud and clear that a lot of our bigger operators out there are feeling those pressures, and we're welcoming the ideas around what we're looking at. And we had, are they here? A couple of examples.
Peter's got a question first.
Sorry?
Peter's got a
Yeah,
question.
just through the chair to Joan, just to add to that, is one of the things that we were talking about in RMA, which is also happening in the other municipalities, is the development of these big industrial electric things, because there's no real legislation around it and there's no real restriction or plan by the municipalities. They really are not able to say, no, you can't sell that property for that. And what's happened is that really, if the municipality has a plan for the land like what we're proposing, we can defer the responsibility of that to the province if we have a plan. If we don't have one, then it's Wild West. Whatever can happen. So I think this is really taking us in the right direction.
Yeah, and essentially it's just to, I guess, protect the right to farm.
Yeah.
And like I say, it was loud and clear in both communities that we went to, and we had some from even the Whitecourt Mountain area that have farmed for years in attendance. And again, they too, they understand that they're in a unique area that is majority of country residential development around them, and they know that they'll more than likely at some point in time, it's going to be country residential, and taking them over as country residential. But where we've got our larger areas up by Fort Assiniboine or Anselmo, or even further down Highway 32. If we can protect those areas, that's the primary goal. So we had talked at the open houses about proposed parcel density options. So under using the farmland valuation, and depending on percentage of your land, if it's those higher values, you'd be allowed to take essentially one parcel out. You could either do an 80-80 split or take the farmstead out. That would be the limit. And again, people seem to be okay with that idea. So if you've got land that is below that market value, and in the kind of the yellows and the pale greens, is we were looking at changing that agricultural parcel density then to 4. So because often what we see is 80-80 split, and then it's, I'll call it a crapshoot if you will, is to the next guy that comes in that's going to get the third parcel out. So we thought in fairness, we'll allow that one more. So we'll go to the maximum of 4.
It's currently at 3.
It's currently 3, yeah. And then of course we do currently have agricultural rural estate district, which allows people to do up to 6 parcels.
So if you did want those larger, like smaller farms, 40 acres or less, you could rezone it to this. If your land wasn't the better agricultural, that would be something we could consider, take to council and approve, so that the more subdivisions can occur and more residences and stuff like that on the lower value ag land.
So again, the goal is just to protect the better agricultural land. And the valuation that we used, I believe it was $114.46 per acre is the cutoff value, which is the darker greens that show on our maps in the map book that's included there. Significantly more land would be protected under this FAV versus using your soil classification, because like I said, the county's got very little class 3, which is considered your better soils, short of along the rivers, and but that's not where a lot of the people are farming. They've got large tracts of land up in Fort Assiniboine there, that, they're actively, you know, farming and getting good crop production out of them, cattle raising and all that stuff, so. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. I don't know if council's got any specific questions with respect to it. Like I say, that's kind of our next step is to, after tonight, is to do the two additional open houses. We thought we would host one down here in the council chambers, kind of capture the Anselmo, Blue Ridge, Whitecourt area. And then we would host one up at Fort Assiniboine as well. And again, just capturing hopefully either Blue Ridge, Goose Lake, and Fort Assiniboine folks. And it'll be on the whole document. Essentially some more of these boards, more around what some of those major changes are, like the reconciliation, you know, some of the maps, I'm sure we can show too on what some of the future land uses are. Like we haven't changed a lot of that based on the old document as far as those, because I think, and I'll use our hamlets as an example, is that if we take that next step doing area structure plans for them, I think that'll better define, you know, where the hamlet commercial is gonna be and where the residential development is gonna be and things like that. But
Hubert?
Yeah, I think this is really proactive, because it doesn't only give us a little bit more ability to identify and do some things to protect the farmland, but it also fits into the overall regional security, food security thing, because what we are saying basically is that it's worth having land set aside for food production, and I think that's a pretty, it's a good statement to make when we do planning like this, so I appreciate the work you guys put into this.
I think just in the document, I believe it's 80%. It needs to be 80% and above.
Yeah, if your parcel was say 50% of 50% good ag land, 50% not as good ag land, then it would be deemed not better agricultural land.
So, and I think what we heard from residents was that maybe that needs to be lowered to 50%, 30%. So I don't know if we kind of show a parcel where there's kind of half and half. Because we're saying 80% has to be that dark green. Whereas maybe it should be 50% of that would be dark green, right? Because there are parcels out there that are, yeah.
But not the whole parcel isn't gonna be the full dark green. So like this parcel, for example, it has like a chunk cut out of it where it might be 75% or 50% dark green versus.
Oh, okay.
So
So there's a lot less down on that.
yeah, this is there's a lot of the dark green is up here, and I don't know.
So if council's interested, we can make that friendly amendment to lower that valuation. Or the percentage, I should say.
So Devin dropped off.
So through the chair, just to clarify that, so right now, if 50% was A3 and 50% was A2 or A1, then a subdivision could be considered? And you're suggesting we should consider saying if the percentage was lower than 50%, if it was 30% A1 and 70%, or 30% A3 and 70% A1?
So when we hit well, I guess that's a good way to put it. Because when we look at the land use bylaw, we're actually going to get rid of the A1, A2. We'll probably keep, well, I don't know if we'll even keep the ARE. We're going to combine those into one district, and then it'll be based on this mapping. So if that dark green, or that valuation of 114 covers 80% of the land, then you've only, will be able to subdivide
One
based on the
parcel.
policies, one parcel.
So if we lower that threshold to 50%, then it would cover more land. More parcels would only be able to
It's
have
protecting
one
more.
subdivision and protect more land. Whereas 80%, it still protects some, but there are some that would have that dark green on 75% of it, but they'll still be able to have 4 parcels or rezone or stuff like that.
Note, Councillor Williams has left the meeting at 6:54. Peter?
Williams or Wilhelm?
Yeah, I think that what my understanding is, and just to make it clear, is that what we're doing, because we don't have a lot of, if you look at the soil classification, we don't have a lot of A1, A2, or A3 really in our municipality. It's not classed as that. But we still have very good, high-quality, viable land. So what we're just trying to do is determine what that is, sort of with our own classification, is what this is gonna be. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Alan?
Sorry, I looked the wrong way. So I struggle to come up with a number that makes sense. You know, I don't sit on the MPC, certainly don't have your experience with this, but if we've had numerous requests to subdivide viable farmland, then I think it would be more of a hot button issue, something that we would have more experience with. But I think I'd be in favor of going with recommendation, and we're gonna review this document in 5 years and letting it play out and see how it goes. Do we have the ability to amend the MDP if so?
Yeah, through the
Yeah.
chair, yes,
Okay.
yeah. If we find within a year or two that, yeah, it's still going gung ho, where, you know, the good farmland is being divvied up, then, yeah, we can
Yeah.
definitely do an amendment to
And I mean,
that
obviously-
specific section.
Sorry to interrupt. At this meeting, we're just gonna recommend to council to accept the presentation. Without seeing a number of applications come forth that were controversial, I don't know that we can really, I wouldn't be comfortable going away from the recommendation.
Just to administration, as far as setting that either 80% or 50%, given we have another public hearing, you're scheduling a couple open houses, would it be, you know, maybe an idea to bring that forward, have it there, and just get the public feedback and see what their take is? Maybe put a couple options where we can kind of explain it to them, and then see what their interest is. Because like we're not obviously setting this right now, but it might be something a little more public feedback.
Okay.
Peter?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say, is that
Alan?
the original open houses were just to flow the thought process that administration had out there. And now you guys refined it, and now we're gonna go back and say, what do you think this looks like? What are some of the things? And so I think, once we have that, it's probably easier for us to say, how do we allocate?
So just one last question. Does the word chicken appear anywhere in this document? No? Okay, good.
Land use bylaw.
Thanks.
Ron?
So I just got a clarification question on the AZR because it's airport zoning regulations, because it is fairly new. So under the Transport Canada document for airport zoning regulations, it says lands within the airport boundary are under the control of the airport operator and don't require an AZR. Since Transport Canada certification requirements normally extend beyond, AZRs apply to surrounding off-airport land. So I guess the question would be, what are we considering the airport boundary?
Airport Service District. So that Nav
That's the
Canada
airport
has got-
boundary? Is the airport service district?
We've currently used what is the titled parcel, which includes the runway, the taxiways, and the limited commercial districts. And what else is there? The limited industrial parcels.
So that's the airport boundary.
That is what's the titled parcel encompasses.
Well, I think so. That's the airport boundary then?
That's what we utilize, is the
Okay.
boundary, yeah.
Yeah, that, for me, the definition of an area structure plan is normally quite clear. Like if you look at the Pride Valley Area Structure Plan, we have a border on it, and it determines exactly what happens within that border. So I would think that an airport or any kind of a development that's a major development would have that kind of a perimeter or border where we could determine how everything works within that. So I'm kind of just feeding off of that question and wondering if we have a defined border in our planning at this point in time.
Through the chair to Councillor Keelkin. Yes, there is a defined boundary, which is the titled area. Within that, in the land use bylaw, there's the airport service district, which encompasses the runway, the taxiways, the VOR, and the NavCan building. And then there's the limited commercial district within it. There's the limited industrial districting. So outside of that airport service district are then these other districts within that boundary.
Okay, so now that I understand that a little bit better, just like the agriculture proposal in this document that we came up with, all of these things are fluid, and with the understanding that this is probably something that we inherited before my time here and before a lot of our time here. Would there be a consideration to absolutely review that again and have that brought to not only the same as we did with the agriculture community, would bring that to the people who utilize the airport, including the provincial government who uses it for staging area for their, to find out exactly how to best apply best practices there, because that's kind of what we're doing with ag land, is trying to figure out how we do that.
So through the chair, that's the airport master plan.
Okay.
It
So we
be-
would have to review that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I'll make a motion that the G&P committee accept the presentation on the preliminary MVP draft as information.
Any questions regarding the motion? Don't see any. Call the question, all in favor?
In favor?
Passed. Next is our next meeting date, October 25th, 2023.
Make a motion.
We finally got one in. We are adjourned. No, I guess we'll, all in favor?
In favor?